The all-new Jackson Ford in Decatur. It's their grand opening celebration, Friday, August 30th at 5 p.m. Great prizes and giveaways, including gas cards, a free oil change every 15 minutes, and enter to win a brand new iPad. Plus, everyone who comes in for service gets a free car wash. Catch all the excitement at the grand opening of the all-new Jackson Ford in Decatur.
Jackson Ford of Decatur, everything you're looking for.
In Decatur and at JacksonCars.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2013 preseason edition of Prep's Preview for Football. I'm Herald and Review sports writer Justin Kahn. To my left is Aren Dow, and to my right is Scott Ritchie. We have a lot to get into today, so why don't we start out with talking about teams that we're looking most forward to seeing this season. Scott, who do you have?
I mean, I had to go with Cherry mainly because I didn't get a chance to see them play, in person last year, and they had a great season, and they have a lot of the pieces back to kind of build on that success. Steve Isbell and D. Woods and Cole Blickensurfer in the backfield. I mean, that's one of probably the top running back, fullback, quarterback combos we have in the area. They're replacing their entire offensive line, but went out there, talked to the players and Coach Andy Curley and said it's coming along. So I'm just kind of interested to see what Isbell can do. I mean, he was one of the best players in the area last year, and I'd like to see him in person.
Aaron, how about you? Who's the team you're looking forward to?
I'm going to go on the other side of Little Oak. I'm going with Arthur Lovington and Atwood Hammond. These guys know I'm all in on Tyler Shuring this year. I think he's going to be a phenomenal player. You kind of look at what he did his freshman year, his sophomore year, and really improved his completion percentage. He has a lot of pieces back, and his dad and coach, Dale Shuring, has been raving about the offensive line and how good they are, and they've been able to come together after the first year of the co-op, and I think there's so much talent and so much returning to a team that, I mean, it was quietly 7-2 in the regular season last year, and I think they'll be a team that surprises a lot.
The team I'm most looking forward to seeing is Moreau Forsyth. I think it's the easy answer. But, they're a fun team to watch. I think there's no team that really quite plays, that aggressive style like they do as far as just, taking chances on offense, and they throw the ball a lot and they go deep a lot. And, that's just not even mentioning the athletes they have on that team that can run that offense and that defense, with Jack Hockaday, who's now receiving, college offers from Big Ten teams and getting looked at by a ton of D1 teams. He's going to be playing quarterback and free safety and punting the ball. So he'll be on the field pretty much all the time. And then, you have Justin Mycroft on defense. I mean, it's just a super athletic team that plays a fun style. And, it's just fun to see, a style like that being played by players that are as good as they have. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun watching them. And
if I get an assignment to go out to Maroa, I'm not going to turn it down. I mean, I got to see them a little bit last year, and you're right, they are a fun team to watch, and just play good football.
Now we're going to go to some possible surprise teams. I'll start out here. I think there's a lot of teams in the OCA with it pretty much being real top heavy this year. I think there's a lot of teams sort of in that middle range that can kind of come up and surprise. I know Scott and I both picked OCA teams for this category. I'm going to go with Sullivan. Sullivan has good numbers. I think it's one thing every year with their team, they've had really been building it from having good numbers. They haven't seen the results on the field yet, but I think that you saw them take some steps last year. Now, they graduated a lot of those kids, but the program is still, I think, numbers in the 70s. And they do have two really good juniors in Nick Frericks at quarterback and also Joe Jeffers in the secondary. Those guys will both play on defense as well. And that kind of gives them some leaders and some guys to start with to go along with what should be a pretty good offensive line and good numbers. The problem is the rest of the teams are sort of, in similar positions in the OCA Black. Other than Unity, everybody's, kind of fighting for that second or third spot. And I think, it could be any of those teams. It could be St. Teresa, it could be Clinton that kind of comes up, Shelbyville even that comes up this year. So, that's nothing easy for Sullivan, but I do think they have sort of the building blocks. You can make a case for them to make the playoffs this year.
And I went, with St. Teresa, staying in the OCA. And, they have, a lot of seniors this year that have played, at least as juniors, and some that started playing varsity football as sophomores. So they have experience, and probably a little motivation, coming off of a 2-7 season. That it's not exactly the type of season the St. Teresa's used to, and kind of a wild card for them is Christian Williams at quarterback. I mean, he's obviously one of the best basketball players in the area, getting several Division I looks on that sport, and now they're going to use his athleticism at quarterback. And I guess one thing is he's definitely going to be able to see over his line and the field because 6'5", so they're putting a big guy back there. But yeah, he moves well, and saw a little video on him, and it looks like he's throwing the ball pretty well too.
I'm going to go with Eisenhower, and I'll readily admit my opinion may be a little skewed because the 2 games I covered last year were probably their 2 best games last year. But they have a ton of players coming back on defense, and if you kind of look at just in the Big 12 last year, they had the 4th best defense as far as points allowed. And you have a lot of those same players returning. You have an offense that's looking to move toward the spread. I know Cleo Cook, who's the starting running back this year, talked a lot about how in JFL and coming up, that's what they ran, that's what they're comfortable with, that's what they like. And there's a lot of optimism surrounding that, and kind of becoming a little bit more quicker, a lot more movement on offense. The only thing, Dylan Smith last year only threw 70 times, so he's kind of still a big question mark. I mean, maybe he'll kind of be someone who can kind of command that offense, but hasn't had points in the past you can kind of look to and say, hey, so I think there's potential there, and I really think Eisenhower could be a 3 to 4 win team this year.
Okay. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about teams that could go either way. I mean, basically teams that could have really big years or teams that could really fall, by the wayside and have bad years. I'll start out here. My team is Mount Zion. I think that, they had a rough year last year. It seemed like everything broke against them as far as they had 4 road games to start the season and just never could really. And once they started bad, they couldn't really lift themselves out of it. It didn't seem like. I think this year, especially they only have 3 area teams on their schedule. So a lot of these teams, I don't have a great grasp on how good they're going to be coming back. As far as Muhammad Seymour and Highland and Jerseyville, Bethalto Civic Memorial. I mean, in the past those have been games that Mount Zion could win, and last year they weren't. They were the games that they lost. So I really, looking at the schedule and then the Apollo kind of being up in the air too with Mattoon and Effingham. Looking like they could have decent teams. Are they going to be better than Mount Zion, though? I don't know. I think they could be anywhere from 2-7 to 7-2. I really do think that there's, things could fall, and especially with a new offense, with Coach Popovich's new offense. I mean, who knows if they catch that right away? They're going to be really good. If not, they could struggle a little bit.
I think every game in the Apollo is going to be a coin flip this year because Charleston lost. Sean Hussey at quarterback, was one of their best players. Josh Casley's not coming back this year. So, I mean, they could win all their Apollo games or, none of them. So it's really, just kind of, who comes, and plays a little bit better that night.
Yeah, I agree.
I have Central A&M as kind of my team that could go either way. Obviously, they have some good players returning, but they're losing Curtis Ramsey. They're losing, a lot of that passing offense that – maybe offset some of that running game. We'll see. I think, the returning offensive line between Logan Long and you have some other pieces there, I think it's a pretty good building block right there. And Zach Ballinger in the backfield. I know they have, 3 or 4 backs that they're touting, and I don't think anybody's going to get tired because they have so many people who they can just sub in at any time. But I think, the OCA, you have that middle group that is up for grabs. And that is one of those teams where, maybe they'll be just like last year, running maybe a different style of offense from what they had last year. But I think A&M is a team that, maybe they could do well, and, who knows how that could end up.
Yeah, definitely.
And, kind of another question mark team is MacArthur. They have a lot of talent on that team this year with, Jaquay Owens, transferring over from Eisenhower, and Chantress Spates is getting some, Division I looks. Devin Ingram is back for another year at quarterback. And it's just kind of building off what he's been able to do the last couple of years, and know for sure that their defense is just gonna kind of spread the field and just use their speed to their advantage. And talking with their coach Derek Spates, he said he expects defense really to kind of be their strong suit, and it's just a matter of getting Jaquay Owens involved in the offense. He's a good fit for their read option, and if things go right, if they don't hit a stumbling block like last year week 1 against Jerseyville where they kind of played themselves out of that game and just kind of set the tone for not a good season, they could make a run through their last year in the Big 12. And if they kind of have those same little miscues, things could get derailed again and could be a repeat of last year's, kind of disappointing season.
Guys, who do you think are some teams that are kind of laying the groundwork for the future here? So I know you guys maybe kind of agreed on a team that definitely, after having a bad year last year, is kind of laying the groundwork this year for some good years in the future.
Right. Tuscola, had a lot of success in the past, and last year, not normally who they are. Rick Runner has proved that he can have a good team, and you have a lot of young players. And Nick Bates, I believe, is a sophomore. He's going to be quarterback in that offense. You have a lot of young players who, their record may not be the greatest this year, but I think, and maybe they will break out and have a good season. But I think they'll be laying, like you said, lay that groundwork for the next couple of years.
And I said, Tuscola as well. Even, with a down year last year, they went into Week 9 at Argenta with the chance that if they win, that's their 5th win, and, maybe make the playoffs. So with the young team, I think at one point they had, obviously freshman at quarterback Nick Bates, and they had like a sophomore running back and a sophomore receiver. So they have some young players in, the key skill positions. They're, getting that experience last year, build on that this year, and, maybe in kind of a strange year for the OCAW, it's last year. I guess we also mentioned that. I mean, last year the OCAW, as we know it, that anything could happen. I mean, maybe they get right back into that, playoff mindset.
My team I feel like is really laying the groundwork is Sangamon Valley. It's been a rough go for them in the Sangamo Conference. That was, not a great move for them competitive wise since they've moved there from the LVC. They had probably, skill wise one of their better teams in a long time. A couple of years ago with Dan Rentschler and Eric Leonard and Nick Craig at quarterback, and they couldn't. I think the best they did was win 4 games. I think if that team's in LVC during that stretch of time, they're at worst a playoff team, and probably, definitely maybe had a year where they were either number 1 or number 2 in that conference. So this year, this is their last year in the Sangamo. They're going to be young. They're going to have starting a team with a ton of sophomores. They have a huge freshman class, barely any seniors. I think they have 4 or 5 seniors. So pretty good guys, that are going to help usher in this future. But I think that, this year it's going to be tough for them to win more than maybe, I think pessimistically you could say 1 win on their schedule. I think optimistically you could say maybe 4 wins on their schedule. I know that, talking to Michael Lee, their coach, he thought, if I'm being really super optimistic here, I could see 7-2 out of this schedule. Probably, more like, 3-4 wins. But they do have a quarterback. They have a pair of twins, the Hutchins, Miles and Mason. Miles is a quarterback. He'll start this year. Mason is a fullback. They'll both start at linebacker. I think they feel like they have a really good young linebacking core kind of built around those two on the outside that could, maybe be a strength. And then, going forward, they move back to the LVC. There's going to be a lot of guys, including Wyatt Beals is another sophomore who is a great athlete, and he's going to help them at halfback and receiver this year. So, there's a ton of talent that they're going to take. It almost is good they're taking their lumps this year in the Sangamo because, next year when they're in the LVC, they're going to know what really top-level competition looks like. And yeah, there are some good teams in the LVC, but I just think that this is, you're looking at a powerhouse maybe going forward and here in a couple of years at Sangamon Valley in the LVC. So that's something to look forward to for them after, a couple of lean years here. Any games you guys are looking forward to over the course of this season?
I had Mount Zion, and I had crossed out Muhammad Seymour and put Matt Toon in there. I think, I thought week 1, we're all so much, going on with Mount Zion's offense. What's it going to be like? You hear so much about it, and I think Mount Zion fan base is really looking forward to that week 1. I think it may take a couple weeks, especially with, Muhammad and Jerseyville and Highland, all 3 pretty good defensive teams, and I think, maybe once they get past that first part of the schedule and they get into the Apollo, they've had 3 weeks to kind of work on that offense and see how it's progressed. I think Mattoon may be that first week that they really have things going and it's really polished and they have some time to pick up that offense. So I think, week 4, Mount Zion, Mattoon, it should be really interesting to see, how that offense has come along and what it's capable of.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm kind of interested to see, how fast play fast means at Mount Zion and just how fast they're able to go. But the game really I'm kind of looking forward to the most is Cerro Gordo Bement against Arthur Lovington Atwood Hammond. I mean, it's the matchup of the split South Piatt co-op, but probably going to determine who's going to sit atop the LOVC this year, because Villa Grove will be good again, but Cerro Gordo and I think Arthur are the top two teams, and maybe I think it's an early season game, I believe week 4, kind of determining who the league champ's going to be, and this could be an interesting game. I mean, pretty good offenses on both sides, some solid defensive players as well, so it could be a great game to watch.
I'm going to go with Maroa, Forsyth, Helena Unity for obvious reasons. I don't think that I have to sit there and explain for 5 minutes why that's a great game that I'm looking forward to seeing. I think everybody knows that. So we'll skip in now to the our preseason top 5s. And I think that there's going to be a lot of teams who have a repeat on this one. I think we all kind of have a similar outlook, at the area going into the season at least.
I mean, I guess I'll start my number. Well, let's start at number 5. We'll build to number 1. Number 5, I have Nokomis. They had pretty good year last year. Made it to the playoffs. Ran into Monticello, in 3A. They've dropped down to 2A now, and they return. Austin Chaussee, they're starting running back. Bryce Pavolka, they're starting fullback, and Luke Hamlin, they're starting quarterback. That's a good start, and they're all pretty good offensive players. So, number 4, I have Cerro Gordo Bement. Mainly, they could have jumped as high as 3, I guess. My 3 and 4 went back and forth, but Cerro Gordo at 4, just because their offensive line is still kind of a question mark. Everybody knows what Steve Isbell is going to do, and D Woods is going to run people over, but just how their line blocks is kind of an issue. And Argena, Oriana at 3, they have some guys returning up front on the line, and they will be blocking for another backfield that returns intact with Cameron Hupp and Gage Eller and Taylor Farrell and Austin Wins-Kunis, if he's healthy. And at 2, I have KZ Westfield, and mainly I looked this up because I was kind of interested. Only 3 times in the last 30 years have they not made the playoffs, and for the last decade they've won at least 10 games. So even though they lost some players, I have a pretty good feeling that they're going to be good again. And at number 1, the defending 1A state champs, Maroa Forsyth, they're bumped up to 2A this year. Most likely they're kind of on the 1A, 2A bubble, but I think either class, they might find their way to DeKalb this year for sure.
Aaron, let's hear yours.
I got Arthur at 5, and I kind of talked about the Lances already, and CGB at 4, and really those two are pretty close. And first couple weeks maybe we'll get to see how week 4 is going to play out, and like you said, is that line for the Broncos is it going to hamper Steve Isbell and D Woods that much? I think Cole Blickensderfer is a really interesting player this year. I think he might get a little more passing reps in the offense and on a schedule that's a little tougher than what they had last year, and they'll be closer in games where they're not getting pulled in that first half. So I think Cerro Gordo is a really interesting team that they may change things up a little bit. I have Casey a little bit lower. I know they've had the record and they've had all the success, but they lost a lot. They lost Ajay Meeks and Dalton Livix, 2 really good running backs from last year. I know KZ has a lot that they had in the past, but still, I think they still have to kind of prove. And interesting note too, they may be moving down to 1A while Moreau moves up to 2A, kind of a flip from what last year was. I have Argena at 2. I think with all that they have returning, and with the Oka how it is this year, I think Argena is going to have a pretty easy time kind of running through the Oka, except for my number 1, Maroa, who returns nearly every position. And the people they lost last year, they kind of mask with how good those players behind them or around them are. I don't think Maroa's going to have any trouble. I'll say they're going to make state and probably win state this year.
Okay, I went a lot of different ways on my number 5. I'm going to change it on the fly here. This isn't what I have down on paper. I'm going to go with Olney as my number 5, even though I think that, quarterback-wise, I think Justin Bailey did a lot for them last year. They have a lot back. I think their schedule kind of, plays well for them. I think they can win, 7 games on that schedule. So, and I don't know that I really have a solid top 5, number 5. I'm sorry. So I'm going to go with Olney here to start the season. They'll have a tough one in KZ the first week, so it's going to be hard for them to stay on that number 5. But we're going to start with them at number 5. Number 4, I'm going with Argena. I agree with what these guys say. I think that they are pretty loaded. They have to prove they can do it for a full season. Last year they had kind of a hot start and faded late. I think that they can go on a little longer run this year possibly than just the first round of the playoffs. Number 3, Cerro Gordo Bement. Just really like what they've been doing, so I got them at number 3. Number 2, KZ Westfield. Like Aaron said, they did lose a lot. They do have their quarterback, Nico Stepina, back. He's been offered from Illinois State as kind of an athlete type, so he's going to be doing everything on the field for them. Quarterback, playing on defense, and also returning kicks possibly. So you'll be hearing a lot about Nico Stepina this year. And at number 1, Merle Forsyth. I just don't see anybody else that's better than Merle right now. So that's our top 5. We'll have plenty more coming up on HR Preps leading up to this season, including, like I mentioned before, our preview stuff. And, of course, we'll have Preps Pick'em going on again this year. So that should be fun. I was humbled a little bit last year, so I won't brag as much this year. And then, of course, we'll have, be on Facebook and also on Twitter. We all have our own Twitter handles. So check us out on HR Preps on Twitter as well. And, again, on hrpreps.com. And we'll see you out there come the start of the season.
Once football practice started last week, I've been tweeting some questions to our high school football fans, and to make sure I don't disappoint my Twitter faithful, Kyle Gibson from Pana tweeted at me. He was just kind of wondering how good I thought the Panthers might be this year, and they went 5-4 last year, lost their first game in the playoffs, and I think if they kind of figure out how they replace the production at running back from Nick Dilley, that they're good for 6-3 season, maybe 7-2, and I think a lot of that's going to come on their defensive side of the ball. They have a defensive end, Brody Carls, 6'5", 250, big kid, has the size at the position really. He's getting some D1 looks, as well. So, Kyle, there's your answer. I've kind of set the bar pretty high for you, so you've got some talent out there in Pana. So let's just see what you can do with it.